welcome to tonight's town hall meeting brought to you by KMPH Fox 26 News and News Talk 580 KMJ. I'm Ashley Ritchie.
And I'm Monty Torres. We're coming to you live on the Valley's CW as well as on KMPH.com, KMJNow.com, and BakersfieldNow.com.
Tonight we are having a frank, straight-to-the-point discussion about the extreme drought affecting California. Water for farmers, water for families, water to protect certain fish, and what's in store for the Valley's future.
Tonight's town hall is taking place at People's Church in Fresno. We've assembled a panel of people from government and agriculture to answer audience questions and those you post through social media. You can post your questions for our panel on our Facebook page or on Twitter using the hashtag WaterTownHall. Our panel includes two members of the California State Assembly. The Honorable Henry T. Perea is a Democrat who represents California District 31. And that district includes a big part of the city of Fresno, along with the cities of Kingsburg, Sanger, Selma, Orange Cove, and many others.
That's right. Mr. Perea serves as chair of the Assembly's Agriculture Committee. Assemblyman Jim Patterson is a Republican who represents California District 23. His district includes more than half of the city of Fresno, all of the city of Clovis, and the cities of Friant, Shaver Lake, Auberry, Minkler, and others. He serves as vice chair of the Assembly's Utilities and Commerce Committee.
Bill Croyle is the Deputy Director of Statewide Emergency Preparedness and Security. He also serves as the California Department of Water Resources Deputy Director and Drought Manager. His department controls much of the water that flows to California farmers and other interests. The department is also working with farmers and cities on many conservation measures.
Steve Chedester is the executive director of the San Joaquin River Exchange Contractors. That organization is a driving force in the fight for water rights involving many Valley farmers. His organization works with agriculture interests in an area that covers nearly 250,000 acres of farmland.
Tommy Esqueda is the City of Fresno's Director of Public Utilities. Fresno and other California cities face mandatory water cutbacks ordered by state officials. If those aren't met, they will result in large fines. Fresno has successfully nearly met its goal through conservation methods.
Cole Upton is a Valley farmer who lives in the Chowchilla area. He is the owner of Upton & Sons and has fields in Madera and Merced counties. He is a board member of the organization Families Protecting the Valley. He is a past chair of Friant Water Users Authority and Chowchilla Water District. He holds a master's in aerospace operations management from USC and served as a captain in the United States Air Force.
Now, let's take you live to People's Church and send it over to tonight's moderator, Mark Hyman.
Nearly half the state of California is classified in the highest category of drought, exceptional drought. 2/3 of the state is classified extreme drought or higher. Now, the snowpack melt in the Sierra Nevadas is at extremely low levels. Groundwater reservoirs are at below levels, in some cases have even dried out. And then when it comes to the Colorado River Basin, long time a source of fresh water for the state of California, it's now limited. In fact, the situation is dire. Good evening, I'm Mark Hyman, host of Behind the Headlines. Thank you for joining us. California's water drought. Tonight we talk about it. Now we've got a great audience here, anxious to get started with questions of our panel of experts. You met them in our opening introduction. Now, our live audience aren't the only ones who can ask questions. You at home can also join this important discussion because a question we ask live on air may be yours. We'll give you details shortly on how you can join in on the discussion. Now, this is a town hall meeting. It's all about getting questions asked and answered by our panel of experts. But our first question tonight is not going to go to the panel, but it's going to go to my live audience here. I'd like you to respond to the following statement with the sound of applause. Your two choices and answers are yes and no. Please respond to the following statement. State officials have a sound policy and a common sense plan in place to deal with the drought. Those who believe yes, please applaud. Those who believe no, please applaud. I'd like to put the same question to our panel of experts by a show of hands. Does the state have a plan in place to deal with the drought, a common sense plan? If you believe yes, please raise your hand. And if you believe no, please raise your hand. All right, we're going to go to our first audience member question evening. Please step over here and join me for a moment. Step on over here.
Okay.
Please tell us who you are, where you live, and what is your question?
My name is Sarah Wolf. I'm a farmer on the west side of the San Joaquin Valley, and I live here in Fresno. And, you know, We have been suffering from this drought for a long period of time, longer than the drought has been in existence. And so, you know, our communities have been suffering, our farms have been suffering. We have not had adequate water supply, and so our farms have been fallowed. My question to you all would be, how are we going to approach this in a way that is balanced? Because we do have an added user in the system. We have the environment that we need to meet the needs of, and we haven't made an allocation of water for them. We've just taken away from others. So how are we going to meet that demand and still meet the needs of the urban users and the ag users and now the environmental users going forward?
Well, let's start with Mr. Croyle. I mean, and she's right. This problem didn't develop overnight, and it isn't just 2 or 3 years old. It's been around for some period of time. We've gotten to this point for a variety of reasons. So what's the future hold?
The future, I think, will continued coordination and collaboration between all of the agencies, the NGOs, the interests, in making sure that we are aware of the facts, our process, our existing conditions, and the state that we're in. And so to the extent that there's, we've worked through many of our water challenges in California over the years, going all the way back to 1976, 77, which I think, you know, the last significant historical drought that in current times that we're responding to, there's been an awful lot of effort at local, state, and federal levels to deal with this. The challenge that we have right now is we're out of the box. This is an extreme drought condition, and what that has done is flipped over a few rocks that, thank you, a few rocks that have been, what's under those rocks has been there for a while. It's highlighted by our current conditions and really forcing all of us to deal with some of the challenge, just like the balanced approach. We have a lot of regulatory structure in place. We have a lot of water rights. We have some of our systems have been updated. We have new information and transparency in our system. The challenge is now with these extremely dry conditions is how do we make these decisions in a way that minimize the impact to all beneficial uses in California. And the challenge is there's not much water to go around to kind of work through those challenges that we have as we sit here today and looking forward here throughout the summer and potentially next year.
Well, let's go from the state level over to the local level. Mr. Upton, what do you think? In fact, if I can just get all of you to grab your microphones and have those in your hand.
Well, the problem is balance, all right? We do have the what's called, Sarah called the new user environment. But the problem is the environment has taken 50% of the water now. And there is no requirement for efficiency on the environmental community or the environmental releases. On the ag and the urban, we're required to be efficient, and we should be. But there are millions of acre feet that have been gone out to the out through the delta, out to the ocean, that are not doing one bit of good for the species for which they are taken. We need to have an objective analysis of the environmental releases like we do all the rest. And if they're not being beneficially used for environment, then put them back to the people that were beneficially using them, because we're in a bad situation now. And when the floods come, and hopefully they will, we're going to have to be able to get that water to put it in the underground. Right now, the environmental community is going to want to take most of the flood waters as well as what we have now. So we'll never recover until we get a balanced approach.
Before we move on to the next question, I saw Mr. Patterson, you grabbed your microphone, so I suspect you...
Appreciate the question. I speak bluntly, as many of you know. If we are in a dire circumstance, if we are in a drought that is disaster proportion, and it seems to me we are, then we've got to do first things first. We've got to take care of people and property first, and the environment's going to have to just get in line and get at the back of the line. It's like a forest fire. Are we going to ask our firefighters to stop putting out the fire that is threatening homes and people in order to spend a lot of time and energy saving the spotted owl in the tree? We have to make very tough choices. Those tough choices have got to be people and property first. And then secondly, we've got to make sure that the promises that have been made to us with respect to the storage and are promises that are kept. My biggest concern is this drought will end, the water will back, the snow will fall, the rain will fall. We will not have built Temperance, we will not have built sites, we have not built the interconnect in Central California, and we'll be looking around wondering, where's all the new water? We better find ways of getting new water and allocate it to people and to property first.
We'll get to the other panelists in just a moment. I want to get a next question from this gentleman. Please tell us who you are, where you live, and what is your question?
My name is Mario Santo. I'm the Executive Director of the California Latino Water Coalition. I live in Reedley. And my question is to the Assembly members specifically, because both of you were very engaged, very active in both the legislation and ultimately the successful pass of Proposition 1, which is the water bond. And within that, there's the storage chapter that Assemblymember Patterson just spoke of, which has lots of dollars to be able to build Temperance and possibly Shasta enlargement. The question I have for you is this, is there are going to be some challenges in acquiring that money and ultimately building these projects, but these projects are important because otherwise we won't be able to save all those millions of acre feet that go to the ocean right now. So what is it that you think is necessary for us here in the Central Valley to acquire the dollars out of Prop 1 to start building some storage?
Mr. Perea?
Sure. Well, thank you, Mario, for the question. I think this can dovetail a little bit into the previous question as well in terms of what do we need to do. I think there are two things that are really missing. And the very first question you asked is, does the state have a common sense plan? And I raised my hand when we got around to no. And at best, I would give the state an incomplete on our response to the drought, because two things are missing: conveyance and storage. Now, I was really pleased to be one of the 5 members to write Proposition 1, which we all had the chance to vote on our ballots. I was honored and pleased to see that measure go before voters, because this is the first time, it's my understanding, this is the first time in California history where surface storage was included in a water bond. First time we as voters have ever had a chance to say yes to surface storage. So the message was sent loud and clear to Sacramento that surface storage is a priority not only for this state but for this region. But make no mistake, we still have opponents. We still have people that do not want to see surface storage built. Now, I think Jim and I, Assemblymember Patterson and I, would agree that there are a lot of partisan issues for he and I to fight over. And we do every Monday and every Thursday. But water is not one of those. Water is one of those issues where he and I and other Democrats and Republicans have been able to come together, negotiate deals around Proposition 1 and other measures. But the key is going to be now the follow-through. So now we got to make sure that we continue to stick together, work with our local advocates, our agencies, our water districts, our other political folks at the local level to make sure that the promises that were made in Proposition 1 are promises that are kept, and make sure that the money that we had for storage is actually spent for surface storage within our community so we can capture the water that Mr. Patterson was talking about in moving forward. So I believe moving forward on building surface storage, making sure that we build conveyance, a conveyance that allows for water to be moved from the north to the south and to the central so that our farms and our cities can participate in this economy and make sure that our people get to work.
And Mr. Perea, if the 2 assemblymen do fight, we hope you fight on Fox 26 before anywhere else. Mr. Chidesha, let's bring you into the conversation. Same issue. There's that whole bond issue. It's $7 billion. Has money even been spent yet? And if not, I wonder why not.
I don't believe much of the money has been spent yet. There's been some dedicated for drought contingency or drought planning, but as far as for storage, either groundwater or surface, there has been none, as far as I understand. So they're still working on it. We need to build more storage. We've got a system that was designed for 17 million people in the state, and now we have 38 million people. And that doesn't include now with the recently passed groundwater legislation that's going to make it even harder to do groundwater and use it as you have in the past. You add that with the rest of the regulatory constraints and new requirements that are being required for environmental purposes, and you have a system that's broke. And so we need to fix it. And the bond, I think, was the first shot at saying, okay, we need to take this money. This is a down payment. It's not going to solve all of the problems. But let's take it and spend it wisely and show that you can build projects north, south, to take care of not only the people, but the farmers who produce the jobs, who produce the food, the safest food in the country.
And Mr. Escueda, I'm going to bring you in the conversation. Fresno is a city that was founded when there was abundant water. Not so much today. You must be concerned as the head of public utilities about providing water to your citizens.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are the people and property thing. That's why the utility exists, is to deliver water to those things in the community. Fortunately, the mayor and the council worked together to develop a capital plan here for the city to take advantage of the 180,000 acre feet allocation we have out of Millerton Lake and Pine Flat. The storage is there for us and our community. We just haven't had the infrastructure to get here. It was really the conveyance piece. We were missing the conveyance piece to get it out of the mountain into the city, and then make use of it that we could distribute it to everyone community. I want to thank Assemblymember Perea for helping us get some financing in place for one of the big projects, about $186 million for a new surface water treatment plant. That was able to save the community about $150 million. So just kudos to you in helping us get that done, and to some of our council members who helped push that through. So for us, the goal is to try and get as much uses out of the water that comes out of nature as we can. So the stormwater is something we want to start capturing as well, keep that here in the community. Our surface water that we pull out of the mountains, we want to keep that here. And on our recycled water that we have at our wastewater treatment plant, we have about 60,000 acre feet of water that we have out at the wastewater treatment plant. We have a $200 million program that's already funded with the rates that the citizens are currently paying to bring recycled water back into the community to offset our demands. And we're really going hard after the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. That's going to just completely change how water gets pumped out of the ground for municipalities, agriculture, industry. And so we're focused like a laser on trying to get that stuff up and running as fast as we can so that we can take care of the community. The people and property thing, I think that's really what we're focused on like a laser.
We're back to the live audience. Please tell us who you are, where you live, and what is your question?
Hi, my name is Jean Johnson, and I'm from Clovis, and I'm nervous.
You're doing great.
Farming is my true lifeline. To see on the news on KMPH how a farmer has to destroy apricot trees is devastating. I grew up working in the fields. My family are farmers down in Ventura County. Now Clovis has become my home. I left Ventura County after 60 years. Why can't we think out of the box if we can help everyone else in every other country, because they are losing something? Devastation of some kind is going on elsewhere. Why is it we cannot help our own U.S. farmers? Because of United Nations Agenda 21 and the White House wanting to destroy America, they are now destroying my farmers.
All right, let's see if we get an answer from...
So I would ask, why are you allowing, you are not thinking out of the box, it's either lie, deny, deflect, or blame. Why can't you bring my farmers back?
I want to bring the ag chairman into this. You've got the committee, so give us some sense of where we should be going and what other steps should be taken.
Sure. Well, I think I think the challenge is that we have some very strong opposition throughout this state that continues to yield a lot of power as we try to coalesce as a community to fight for the projects that are important for our economy. So make no mistake, we are facing some very strong opposition. That is why it is so important that as a community that we unite, whether we're Democrats or Republicans, farmers or farm workers. We're all in this together, and the only people that are going to fight for us are us. And so it's going to be very important for individuals like myself, Assemblymember Patterson, to do everything we possibly can to build the right political coalition across the state that can help us advocate and build projects that we so desperately need, projects like Temperance Flat, projects like conveyance on the west side. These projects are not going to be easy to build, but you have two members of the legislature here, and I would venture, and I don't like to speak on anybody's behalf, but I think our entire Valley delegation is solidly behind this idea of us working together, and we've done so. We've done so through our votes. We've done so through signing letters urging Congress to do certain things, urging our state agencies to act in a certain way. Every time there is an issue around water and ag, our Valley delegation is united. I think the challenge we face is that when you look at the number of members that come out of the Central Valley, we are the minority when it comes to the vast majority of those members that come from other parts of the state. And so we're fighting. We're fighting hard. Sometimes we win, sometimes we don't. But even when we don't, we take a step back, we reassess, we figure out where we need to go, and we continue to fight forward, and we do it together as a team.
Mr. Coyle, I want to play off the question and change it up just a little bit. A few months ago, the governor issued his executive order. He wanted urban water agencies to cut back 25% usage this year as compared to 2013. I think through the end of April, there's been about a 13.5% reduction over use from 2013, so we're not meeting those numbers. But let's say, for sake of argument, when approximately 50% of all water goes to environmental uses, approximately 40% goes to agriculture, and 10% goes to urban uses. For sake of argument, let's say we turned all the water off completely to urban communities, nothing whatsoever. Would that solve our problem, or will we still have a drought?
No, that wouldn't solve our problem. I think it's a challenge across the board, and I think one of the things that's coming out of, especially lessons learned from this last year, is making sure that to the extent possible we can get multiple benefits as we move water around the state. And so certainly, you know, part of our message is we have to conserve, we have to save what we have. And that goes for all of the sectors. And so I think it's important to realize if you turn that faucet off, it might be make a little bit of water available for someone else. But at the same time, whether you're rural, agriculture, or even the environment, there's reduced water availability, and you have to conserve even within those different sectors.
We'll go back to Mr. Upton, and then after we get your response, I'm going to check with my social media anchor to see what our viewers at home think of all this. But again, someone who works at the local level with water supplies, it must be difficult when you have clients, you have customers, you have users, the public, who has certain uses, and it's in tight supply. What kind of decision-making do you go through in your particular case? Have you run into problems where you have to make some hard decisions on where water's spent, where it's used?
Well, the government helped us out a whole lot the last 2 years. They gave us 0%, okay? So we don't have to decide who gets the water. Nobody gets it. So we're getting it from the underground. But I'd like to address the lady's question. You got to know who your opponents are here. The main opponent is an outfit called National Resources Defense Council. That's an environmental organization, very aggressive. Okay, they are the ones that are behind taking our water. They took it from the San Joaquin. They are now after Merced, the Stanislaus, and the Tuolumne. In fact, the colleague of the Assemblyman, Mr. Gray, is a Democrat from Merced. He actually got a bill passed to try to protect the Merced. You know what the Speaker did? Kicked him off the committee. How dare he challenge the environmental community? Okay, he got on another committee, he got it passed anyway. So Mr. Perea is correct. These Valley folks need to be together like they used to be, and if necessary, blackmail or whatever you got to do the rest of their cohorts on the budget or something to get the attention. Otherwise, we're going to dry up here, because that's NRDC's goal. You can read Devin Nunes's Investor Daily article. They told him that 8 years ago. I sat across from him for 4 years. They told me the same thing. This valley should not have been developed.
Let me follow up with Mr. Patterson, and then they're going to check in with my social media anchor. But we're talking about the California drought, but this really isn't just a state issue here. We're talking about an issue that crosses state boundaries. It's kind of a Western American drought right now. Do we need other forces involved in this beyond our state?
Well, I think first of all, we've got to have a federal government that isn't trying to run us out of California and close up our businesses and close up our farms. We do have enemies. There are enemies in the White House right now. On the desk of the Interior Department Secretary is a proposal to place the very site that we are going to use to build Temperance Flat as a wild and scenic river. Now, I don't know whether or not Congress will let that happen. But to Mario's question, what is it we have to do to be able to get this job done? We have to recognize that we have got significant hurdles to get past that are biased against us. number one. Number two, as Member Perez said, we have to be united on this, and we have got to make the case that as California goes, and as California agriculture goes, so goes the rest of the western United States. We are in a crisis drought. That means that we're going to have people who understand that they cannot just be friends with everybody. We have to make tough choices. And one final comment, I think that there is an administrative bias at the governor's office. I believe that there is a bureaucratic bias in the state of California against dams and the conveyance necessary to use them, and it is showing up in all of the meetings I go to and all of the quiet conversations I have behind closed doors. We have a lot of work to do in getting people to change their minds.
Well, we've got a lot of passion right here in the People's Church on the issue of the drought, but our viewers at home have been looking at this issue for weeks, certainly without a doubt. And let's check with our social media anchor to see what they have. Ashley, what do you have for us?
Hey, Mark, we are getting a lot of comments right now. We can only bring one up to you right now. But again, if you all want to send your comments in to us, you can use the hashtag #YourVoiceYourFuture, or even easier, Water Town Hall. You can even email us if you want to at newsdesk@kmph.com, or go to our Facebook page at KMPH Fox 26. My co-anchor Monty and I talk about this all the time every night on the 10 o'clock news. There's multiple stories every night about this drought and about how it's affecting the valley. So obviously a lot of you have something to say. So please send those comments in. We're going to try to get to that first comment from Twitter. And it appears that it is not working. Let's see. Here we go. There we go. It's from Robert J. And it says, balanced approach. Urban users cut, farmers' water rights curtailed, environment untouched by conservation efforts. Hashtag Water Town Hall. And we have a lot more coming in, people asking questions of the government, of the state legislature. Please send them in. Again, hashtag, you can use Your Voice, Your Future, or hashtag Water Town Hall, or send them over to our Facebook page, KMPH Fox 26, or just email us at newsdesk@KMPH. Mark, I'll send it back to you, and in the meantime, I'll look at some more comments and bring them to you guys as we get them.
Thank you, Ashley. Let me go with Mr. Squid and bring you back in the conversation. In general terms, there's really four directions we can move here in California. Reduce use, achieve efficiencies, use more groundwater, aquifers, and so forth, or desalination. Those are really kind of the four major pillars, if you will. Some of those may be more practical than others. What are some of the practical steps that we should be taking? There's always been discussion about desalination, but desalination certainly can be expensive. And there are also environmental concerns, whether it's the brine discharge, whether it's the seawater intake and so forth. And I know this may not be your area of expertise, but what are some of the things that perhaps even those of us here today, what steps can we take to improve our situation?
So I think for us, desalination is certainly in the realm of technically feasible, but just financially it would just be difficult for us to have to spend all that energy out at the coast to get the water cleaned and then pump it back up into the valley. So it's just not a financially feasible option for us right now. What we're currently working on with the community is certainly the conservation piece. It's been painful this particular year, but I want to thank all of the community. Is very proud of the city of Fresno and what we've been able to do with water conservation. You were the #2 water saving utility throughout the state of California, saving 6 billion gallons. All the other places just couldn't touch you. So I want to thank you for that on the conservation. The second thing is the balanced approach. For us, it's really going to a more conjunctive use strategy where we want to use our surface water to the greatest extent practical, let our surface water rest and recharge over time, and then when we come to these events, because we'll come to another drought again, we'll have the groundwater available to sustain us and help our people and property here in the area. Leveraging our recycled water, again, that's another thing we want to do, and then doing what we can to capture that storm water and make that available as a supply to recharge the groundwater. So I think the community here has helped us and talked to us about a lot of different approaches, and that's the strategy we're kind of working on right now is working through that process to get that infrastructure in place, get it up and running, and build a resiliency that'll get us through this type of drought going forward.
And Mr. Chidester, it's tough times in the San Joaquin Valley right now with water shortage and so forth. What do you see in the future? Is there any glimmer of hope in the near term in terms of providing the water necessary for all of your users?
Well, we have a little different situation, but let me step back and go for the San Joaquin Valley. The San Joaquin Valley, as expressed earlier, has been without water for 2 years for the most part on the federal CVP. State water project last year was 5%, this year's 20%. That's all the way from Stockton down to Bakersfield. Huge area that is millions of acres that have not received much water at all. Now, it's not sustainable. So we have to do something different. One thing I'd like to try to direct is, that kind of goes back with the earlier questions, what can be done? You haven't seen in the valley, I think both north and south, that is Northern California Valley, Southern San Joaquin Valley here, united group of growers, water agencies on a common theme, and that is, this is not working. We have to do something different. And so how can we do that? We've talked about long-term solutions, right? Storage, conveyance, that needs to be done, but those are 10 to 15 years out. How are we going to go between this year, next year, and the next 10 years? That's going to take courage, not only of, and we have them here, of our elected officials in the state. It's going to take courage of our federal elected officials. Because right now, if you try to get some even change to allow some flexibility to try to help our valley, our farmers, on getting the water supply, even if it's within the current Endangered Species Act, you can't get it through. It's like the Holy Grail. You talk about it, and no way. You've got to get that kind of courage to get change. It's not going to happen from just a few of us, but what you guys do here on your social media and your letter writing campaigns, that's the start. We've got to keep it going.
And to emphasize the point you just made, and this was something we just talked about a few minutes ago, you need help from the entire congressional delegation here in the state of California. However, they're not in agreement. They know there's a problem that needs to be resolved, but they seem to have different approaches, generally broken down along party lines, at the way to resolve this. And it's sad to say that there isn't a whole lot of sympathy in Washington. If I just may share briefly, the Washington Post had an article just a few months ago, and I found a particularly amazing statement that was in the article. The question was, is it worth squeezing the cities when farms consume 80% of the water that people use in California while they generate only 2% of its economic activity? And I thought it showed incredible naivete and ignorance on the part of the Washington community that sees farmland as, well, relatively insignificant to the problem. Let's go to this gentleman. Please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
I'm Randy Shabazian, and I live in Fresno County, and I'm a psychiatrist. And my question is an outside-of-the-box question, but desperate times call for desperate measures. What's missing from the discussion of the California drought is the concept of weather modification. Specifically, are there rainmaking technologies which could be used to break this drought? And secondly, is there evidence that storm blocking technologies such as HARP ionospheric heaters and geoengineering are being utilized to prolong this drought?
You know, Mr. Croyle, this has got to go right to you. You're the drought manager.
Well, I think there's a lot out there that a lot of information is being pushed forward with regard to other actions or inaction on the part of others, especially whether they're within our region or off our continent. And so that's something that we all look at. We receive a lot of information. We have a team from the various agencies that look at this and kind of vet some of that out. I think with regard to weather modification, certainly as one of the tools that's been used in the past is, seeding clouds and things like that. I think that's actually part of one of the first conversations I had as we jumped into this kind of difficult times back in December of 2013 was we got to start seeding the clouds. Unfortunately, there was no clouds to seed. But I think the awareness of opportunities to try to maybe not modify our weather, but take advantage of some of the storms or systems that come through, which I believe we have. And we've done that through a collaborative effort with what we call our real-time water operations team that have come in and said, we have a storm coming.
And I think we were able to move more water south of Delta over the last 2 years that we wouldn't be able to move if we hadn't built this team together. People that don't normally sit in the same room with the 3 resource agencies, the 2 operators, and the State Water Resources Control Board. So we've seen some success where we maybe are not looking at things that we can modify on the weather, but there are things that we are doing to make sure, to the extent we do get weather, we take full advantage of that, taking and pushing that water into storage, such as San Luis Reservoir, for use later that year, or now it's really important as we move into our 4th year of drought with the water that we have stored south of Delta, because of those difficult conversations, negotiations, and fortunately some alignments with our regulatory agencies.
Mr. Perea, I know that you and Assemblyman Patterson deal with state issues, but are there relationships that we can build with neighboring states to find some of these solutions? Is that occurring right now at the Assembly? Are they having those kinds of conversations, or is it happening at the executive level?
I can't speak at the executive level. I can tell you that at the legislative level, if it's happening, I don't know. I think that we are so consumed with dealing with California's drought that we have not spent the time, at least I have not been involved in any conversations in which we've reached out to our neighbors in the Western region. So we are constantly looking for partners, and I think it's a good point, because I think if Congress is going to act, and I think if Congress is going to put together a package that can help California, I think the only way that happens is if they deal with a broader package that takes care of the drought of the entire Western region, because you're bringing other lawmakers, other members of Congress from other states as a part of the solution for, to meet our needs. And so I think that's a smart strategy to do. I think it's my understanding that a bill was introduced in Congress today, if not the last couple of days, in which it does take a more regional approach, which I think is a smart approach.
Yes, that was the Western Water and American Food Security Act that was introduced today, and there are a number of components to this, and there already seems to be some division amongst the California congressional delegation, and again, it seems to be breaking down along party lines at the moment, but we'll see where that goes. I want to play off this discussion for a moment, Mr. Patterson, because not only in the state of California, but in other Western states, there's been this long-held first in time, first in right. Whoever gets the water rights first gets to keep them. Is that a good policy given where we are today? Should that be reviewed?
Yeah, I think it is. We got to back up a little bit. With respect to water rights, there are water rights that are constitutional, there are water rights that are property-based, there are water rights that have been litigated, water rights that have been negotiated in contracts over, 100 years. The lesson I think we need to learn here is not to panic and not to shred the fundamental way in which we have collected, stored, and transferred water. What is in front of us is a modernization of a federal process, best illustrated by the San Joaquin River watershed and the Kings River watershed, and the state project best illustrated by San Luis. These are important hydrological realities. All they need to have happen is for them to be modernized and to grow. That's why the storage, and that's why the conveyance, and that's why the interconnect between the two projects is so very important. We do not have to reinvent the wheel, and we don't have to panic. What we have to do is recognize there is an entire history of hydrology in this state that has served us extremely well, but it's outdated and it's too small. Let's update it and make it larger. And then when the rains come, and then when the snow comes, then when the runoff comes, we'll have net new water. If we don't, we're going to be sitting around conferences like this saying, but the rains came, the snow came, and there ain't no new net water. We've got to be about new, net, additional water. That's why, for example, temperance is so important. When I was mayor for 8 years, we had, in that 8 years, we had 2 El Nino, La Nina episodes where hundreds of thousands of acre feet spilled over the top of Millerton Dam. We can fix that with temperance. The Kings River flows into 1 million acre feet of storage. The San Joaquin flows into 500,000 acre feet of storage. So we've got a small bathtub on the San Joaquin, and we've got a larger bathtub that saves the water on the Kings. We've got to grow the bathtub on the San Joaquin.
We're back to our live audience. And after we get this young lady's question, I'm going to check with our social media anchor to see what's going on with our viewers at home. But please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
My name is Melissa Fairless. I live in Clovis, and I just want to make a one point, and then I have a question. We don't have a water problem. We have a government problem. And basically, you know, I have my 11-year-old daughter behind me, and I'm scratching my head trying to explain to her how we got to this situation. I'll tell you how we got to this situation. It's by the elected officials. And what we need to do is we need to get the current elected officials out, or we need to go down to their office and let them know where we're at. The other thing I want to say is I voted for Prop 1 with Governor Brown getting his lovely face on TV saying we're gonna put that money to water. I want to know what is being done. He just passed a budget. What was in the budget that makes that money going to go to where it said it was going to go when we passed Prop 1? And I want to know what we can do as citizens. It's not about writing letters. It's beyond that at this point. We have San Francisco and we have LA that don't care about anything. This valley, all these people here tonight, we're not the problem. We are the solution. So tell us exactly what we need to do.
Mr. Upton, when this young lady mentioned that there's a government problem, you shook your head, you nodded your head vigorously. I think you want to comment?
Yeah. You know, this valley was settled by people that had one thing in common. They all came here, their heritage, with nothing. And they started and they built up something. And the genesis of that was when they built Friant Dam, because this area was running out of water in the 1920s and 30s. They brought in Friant Dam to supplement the underground aquifer. They had the 1902 reclamation law, 160-acre limitation. What it did, it gave people coming out of the Depression and World War II an opportunity, like my dad and other folks. And they built up farms from that to the communities that we have now and to the economy we have now. Okay, and then a lot of us are third and fourth generation farmers. I live on my farm, same way as my son lives on the farm. Okay, we've had 4 families from our area sell out in the last 2 years and move out because of water. They're moving to Idaho, they're moving to South Dakota, they're getting out. And they're being replaced in 2 cases by companies from Singapore and places like that that have looked at this and said, hey, there's enough groundwater for us to pencil out 20 years and then there's not going to be any more and then they're gone. So the very fabric of this society is being destroyed by the lack of water. So elected officials, you bet, okay? These guys here, I'm sure they're doing their best, but they're outnumbered, and we need leaders like Governor Brown, whose father was a big water advocate, and that apple fell way far from the tree, and he appoints people like Felisa Marcus as head of the state board, who is from NRDC and is implementing their very policy. So yes, it is elected officials. The lady's right.
And I want to bring Mr. Chester back into the conversation because you also nodded your head when she was talking about government officials. Anything to add?
I said I agree with government officials, but so let's bring it all back. We have to have leaders, right? And I think we've got a couple up here today, but they do need to have help. We're not going to do it only as a valley. And we're not going to do it only as a valley, mainly because we're a couple million people out of 38 million. We've got to somehow get the message back to LA, San Francisco area, the Bay Area, that, listen, we're important. You want food from us? Guess what? And it takes water. And so far that hasn't gotten across very well. Now, sometimes you'll see a glimmer of it every once in a while, but for the most part, you talk to them, you know, sort of, okay, what drought? You know, the mandatory 25% reduction. All right, so what if we don't make it? Where, guess what? As Cole mentioned, 0% allocation twice. There is, those economics are very clear, right? But I also want to go back a little bit. I, for one, am very much in favor of the first in time, first in right, okay? Because who I work for is senior water right holders, so I have to say that or I can't leave this here tonight. But there's a reason for it, and it's a property right, and it is, you know, they bought the land, they came out and settled it before the state, well, right as the state was fairly new, and you know what? They paid a lot of money for that land to have the water.
Thank you, Mr. Chester. Here at Fox 26, we're not taking any positions on this, but there has been some comments about government officials, and we couldn't help but notice an event that took place. So I'm going to ask another snap poll of my live audience. I'd like you to respond with the sound of applause. Your 2 choices and answers are yes and no. I'm going to read a statement and then ask you to respond to a statement after that. Last weekend, President Barack Obama flew to the desert city of Palm Springs in drought-stricken California to play golf at 2 exclusive golf courses, Sunnylands and Porcupine Creek. Now, this is the issue. Sometimes actions mean something. Also, images, optics mean something. Please respond to this statement. The President is not sympathetic to the concerns of everyday Californians like me. Those who believe yes, please applaud. Those who believe no, please applaud. And before I check with social media, Mr. Pryor, certainly as an elected official, you know that there are times that actions are important, but sometimes the images do speak volumes as well. And it's got to be a little disconcerting, and it's not to pick on President Obama specifically, but it didn't seem to convey a sympathetic image to California that he's going off and playing in some of the most exclusive golf courses in the country in an area like Palm Springs. We certainly hope that the governor perhaps would convey that to him, that he's got to show a little more concern so the people of California believe that folks in Washington care. Would you agree?
Respond to that by also responding to a comment I've heard you say a couple of times, and that is that most of these votes and most of these positions are falling along party lines. I would push back on that a little bit. I would push back to say that it's not necessarily party line, but rather regional. Water is very much a regional issue. So there was a question that the previous participant asked about, well, what can we do and what are some of the strategies you're working on? I'll tell you the approach that I've taken the last 5 years. I lead a group called the New Democrats. We're a block of moderate to conservative Democrats who represent rural communities throughout the state. These are the individuals that I am trying to form alliances with to serve as advocates for us in the Central Valley, because I believe Mr. Chittister is right. As the Central Valley, we need to remain united and we need to remain strong. But we're not going to get out of this crisis on our own. We're going to need help from other regions throughout the state that are experiencing similar devastation that we are. And there are moderate to conservative Democrats that believe in what we're doing and believe in the approach that we are taking and are allies with us. The challenge is we're still not the majority. So even when we do partner with our Republican colleagues, you have a sort of a minority subset within the Democratic caucus that is pushing hard with our Republican caucus friends, but we still don't have the votes to get it done. So my point is that we need to continue to reach out to those types of Democrats that believe the same things we do, that are experiencing the same devastation that we are, and make sure that we as a group, beyond the Central Valley, are united and together in pushing for the same solutions.
And your point is well taken. Thank you very much. And I certainly hope I didn't give the impression that one side was doing something good and the other wasn't. Certainly, it's just early returns on that introduced legislation seem to break down along party lines, and I certainly didn't address which sides they were on. But, there's disagreement not only here, but also with our viewers at home. So let's check with our social media desk. Ashley, what's the latest?
Hey, Mark. Yeah, we are getting a lot of comments here. I want to show you one that we got on Twitter. Let's see if it pulls up. Gotta love technology. There we go. Matt Markarian says, is it really possible to build a dam in California in 2015? Tough environmental lobby, hashtag water town hall. And I said we were getting a lot of comments. For some reason, we can only bring one up at a time, but I got my trusty cell phone here and I wanted to read a couple of them to you that have stuck out to me, pardon the fact that it's on my cell phone. Alicia Gallion says, a recent search for Delta smelt turned up one fish. Why are we still denying water to farms in the name of fish? I think that's a lot of something that a lot of people, especially around here, want to know. That's a big point of contention for a lot of people around the valley. Reagan Marquez says, what about tapping into the Colorado River? Shouldn't that be a possibility of tapping into? Again, a lot of people writing in on Twitter. You can also send in your thoughts on Twitter. Use the hashtag Your Voice, Your Future, or the hashtag Water Town Hall. You can even go to Facebook and find us at KMPH Fox 26. You can even go to our email at newsdesk@kmph.com. Send us your thoughts, especially listening to what everyone's saying, what you think about it. For now, Mark, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Ashley. Now, we tend to think of water in terms of people who use it for personal uses in agriculture and so forth, but there are also water rights users who use the water and really essentially just pass it on. You use it briefly and then continue it on down the process. Please tell us who you are, where you're from, and exactly what am I talking about?
I'm Denny Boyles. I'm a senior corporate relations representative with Pacific Gas and Electric Company. We're actually one of the largest senior rights holders in the state. We have over 160 contracts, but 98% of that water does just pass through our hydroelectric system, and the other 2% passes through the hydro system and then is delivered to customers who have their own rights to that water.
So you certainly have concern over, obviously, the availability of water, because in your case, you translate it from water to power.
We do. We've seen the hydroelectric production drop every year for the last 5 years as the drought has impacted us. We also cooperate to measure the snowpack every year for the same reason. We're concerned for the farmers. We have a lot of agricultural customers, and we do quite a bit of work to help them as they're having to go deeper for the groundwater.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate your being here this evening. And it certainly, it occurs to us as you look at this issue, it really is more complex than at first you would first think, because we tend to think of water in very simple terms. But here's an example of a large water user who essentially borrows it, if you will, for a brief period of time for another purpose. What kind of comprehensive plan should we have if we don't have it already, Mr. Croyle? Your concern is you want to stop the drought. We've talked about everything from seeding rain clouds and coordinating with other jurisdictions, but are there other steps that we haven't examined that we should be looking at?
Well, certainly. We've learned a lot. As this drought started last year, the Australians, it just went through a millennium drought, what they call almost 12 years. And in some areas of Australia were in it for over 20 years. So some of the lessons that they've came to California at the invitation of the governor and the Drought Task Force and many agencies and our private partners to look at what are those options and what are we doing right and what are we doing wrong. And a lot of what we see right now as we get in deeper and deeper into the drought, and I would say the available water to move around is tighter and tighter. And so part of it is information collection, and in recognition, as the speaker just mentioned, is actually kind of factoring in how many times we actually do use water and looking for opportunities, which is occurring now as part of our real-time water operations and the communication and working with local water districts and the water users and, frankly, environmental community, is what we call short source shifting. And so that allows us to change when the water is being released out of reservoirs, where, say, a grower can use groundwater until this water is available to later in the season, where the surface water can be used for environmental benefit. So that is something that we're doing right now across the agencies, with local agencies, state agencies, and working with our federal partners to make sure that we're doing everything we can in real time, but also it's collect the data we need to help kind of fine-tune some of the local plans, but more importantly, things like the California Water Action Plan. What are those things? What do we need to do to develop storage, both surface and groundwater? How do we use those resources in a collaborative way to address moving water across the delta? How do we do that in a way that also addresses environmental concerns? And so I think we're collecting information right now that we've never done to. Some of that is from we got kicked from Australia saying, what, you don't have that data? And then also but going back and revisiting the plans that we have.
I have joining me here someone who actually spent some time with the president last year, right? Visited your farm. And I'm going to ask a question of you, and perhaps you can enlighten me and perhaps the rest of us. Assuming there isn't sufficient relief in the months or years ahead, is it possible for certain farms to change the produce, change the crops they have, that something that might be a little more efficient in terms of less water usage would grow in this climate, would keep you in business?
Farmers in the Central Valley have changed already. We've moved not to crops because they use water more efficiently. It's an economic choice. We're moving to crops that we can stay alive with. When you go out and you try to buy water, and if you can even find it, it's $1,500 per acre foot or $2,000 per acre foot. You can't grow melons and tomatoes anymore. You can't grow corn and beans, those kind of things anymore. You have to plant the crops that can survive. And that's what the Central Valley farmers have done.
But that worries me as just a consumer, because you talk about surviving, and we certainly don't want to see farmers just survive. We want to see you do well. Are the farmers in such a position today that they're concerned about their livelihood going forward?
Absolutely, and it's not because we picked the wrong crops. We picked the right crops. All of the crops that we're growing in the Central Valley, there's a huge demand for that. That was what I told the president. He asked me what crops did I grow. And I told him, well, I grow melons, tomatoes, almonds, cherries. And I said, these are the crops that the First Lady thinks that our children should be eating to be healthier and less obese. And it's true, and that's what people want now. I mean, people's diets are changing. They're wanting healthier food. They're wanting fruits, nuts, and vegetables. That's what we grow here.
I want to bring Mr. Patterson back in the conversation. We haven't spoken with you in a few minutes. Anything to add with what Mr. DeBosk had to say?
Well, just I've grown to know Mr. DeBosk recently and through the last couple of years. He's a great spokesman and a great leader. I'd like to take a little turn, if I could, and just suggest some solutions, if you don't mind. I think it's incumbent on us when we are here not to merely complain, but to present some solid solutions. And I'd like to just a couple of quick points. We really have to expedite the building of the storage. We can't just sit around and wait. That means CEQA has to be reformed. The problem with the state of California is they've reformed CEQA for the Kings Stadium and for a couple of football stadiums, but they refuse to give us the authority to pass bills that will allow for CEQA to be reformed for our water projects. We have the State Water Resources Control Board. They really have to work on a much more equitable system for cities, particularly Fresno, I think, and Clovis, because they have saved water. They've spent a lot of money in the last 5, 6, 7 years, and they're getting no credit for the fact that they're doing a really good job. Cole Upton has said it, and I've sat at his feet and learned. The San Joaquin River settlement has to be undone. We have to stop doing the things that are hurting us before we can actually do the things that will start healing us. And then finally, I think we have to expedite and approve construction of these new water projects, especially the conveyance kinds of things. And one of the concerns I have is the interconnect. We were supposed to get money from the governor for the interconnect between the federal project and the state project. I don't see it. It didn't materialize. He promised us that we would have that interconnect money, and that's one of the reasons I signed off on the water bond, and it was supposed to be appropriated $50 million at a time. I sit on the budget committee. I see no evidence that there is any money for a fundamental interconnect between these two projects. These are real solutions that can, in fact, help all of the ones here who have been saying we're in a desperate situation.
We're back to the live audience. Please tell us who you are, where you live, and what is your question?
Hi, my name is Kayla Moon. I'm a journalist. And I would like to state the fact that democracy does not work without participation. The fact that these people are representatives and we have elected them to represent our farmers, which would make up 1% of the nation. So these people have a very small percentage in their voice and what they're able to say and how they're able to represent themselves. And the fact that we as citizens need to be actively participating just as much as our representatives. So it needs to be an equivalent exchange. My question is, has Monsanto's, the company, put its eyes on the Central Valley as a place to invest?
I'm going to have to interrupt you for one moment because I'm going to have to say goodbye to our live broadcast viewers. Those of you watching us on the Valley CW Channel 59, we have to return to our network programming, but we're continuing the entire town hall at KMPH.com. So again, if you're watching us on Valley CW Channel 59, join us at KMPH.com. We're continuing the entire town hall online.